Do you know what Silver Queen and Peaches and Cream are? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Arland Hill. Welcome back out to Harvest Hills Ranch, and today we are going to be talking about Peaches and Cream and Silver Queen. These are two varieties of corn that we're going to be planting, but before we can get to that, we've got to take care of this guy. We had a little unexpected malfunction, so to say, yesterday, and we have a gash in the tire here. And I've had it here for a long time. It hasn't been much of a problem at all. And then all of a sudden yesterday I walk into the barn and it is leaking and the tire's going flat. Well, we've got to go get this thing fixed before we can even think about planting any corn. And I guess this is just another weekend of repairs because we were just getting the bush hog fixed yesterday from breaking some of the welds on it. Nonetheless, that's all part of farming. This is what you deal with. But we're gonna go get that go get this taken care of, so we can get this guy back operational and out and getting some areas ready to plant. So we're gonna go grab a cup of coffee, get that done, so we can get started.
Coffee check.
Well, I got a call from the tire shop a lot sooner than I anticipated. I thought we were gonna end up having to replace this tire, but we actually didn't end up having to replace it, at least not right now, which is good. They were able to do a patch here, and also what we did is the cut in the tire was on the outside. We moved that to the inside. And so we're gonna get the tire back on the tractor, but this is a real blessing for us this morning because replacing this tire would have been close to about $200, whereas putting this patch on it is only going to run us, or actually only cost $15. So I'm gonna get this thing back on here, and thought I'd take you along with me as I do that. So I'm gonna get the tractor jack back up, and I'm gonna get this jack stand out from under here. Always a good idea to put these jack stands on, just for safety, to make sure nothing falls there. So we're gonna get this line back up, and got our lugs here. So I'm gonna let that back down just a little bit. All right, the tire's back on. I'm gonna go ahead and let this all the way down. I've got to tighten these lugs back down to spec to make sure that when I'm using the tractor that we don't get those lugs backing out. So to do that, I'm gonna grab the torque wrench here, and according to the manual for the tractor, this is, it takes 130 foot-pounds of torque on each one of these lugs to secure this down and make sure that these don't start backing out. So we're gonna torque these down here. And all right, got a click there, so that's 130. We'll go around 130 there. And I don't necessarily go just completely around with these. I tend to go in a bit of a star shape just to have a more even pull on these as I'm snugging these up. And then once I get them all snug down, then I go around one final time to make sure that we've got even 130 pounds on each one of these. All right, so we're ready to use this thing again. Got that taken care of. I'm gonna leave this in here. I've got a few other odds and ends things to do with this, but now that we've got this out of the way, because we do use this tractor probably more than all the rest of probably use this tractor the most of the tractors. And so it's important for me to have this one up and running and functional. But like I said, I got a few other things to do to it. So now with this done, we can move on and we can start planting some corn. So let's jump into that. All right, well, we got the other tractor back together and we made it outside, and I'm gonna walk you through how we're going to plant the corn this year and give you some context behind it, because this is going to be you're gonna see me do something different, and maybe it's gonna sound contrary to what I often say. And you'll see I've got our Farmall 140 here, our garden tractor, but you'll notice I've got the disc behind it. And immediately you're gonna look at that and go, well, wait a minute, and you're planting potatoes and you're trying to preserve the land and not turn the soil over, and then you've got the disc on here, and that's definitely going to turn the soil over. And it is, and I have a couple of reasons for doing that. Again, it's not my favorite thing to do, but let me give you some context as to why I am doing it and what I'm going to be doing behind this. So if you'll notice on this, what I had down through here was sorghum Sudan grass and sun hemp and okra, and it created a lot of biomass, so much so that I actually had to cut it down with the bush hog. There was not going to be any other way to lay this down on the ground. And you'll notice from this that, I mean, there's still a lot of material on the ground here. There is no way that I'm going to be able to plant corn into that. I don't have a no-till drill, and they don't make no-till drills that are small scale like this. We've got to have another way to do this. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to take the disc and I'm going to incorporate this into the ground. Now, in that period of time also, I want to point out that you'll see a tint or a hue of green in here, and there are some weeds starting to pop up in this, but fortunately they're very early, and these weeds haven't reached a seed stage yet. That's ideal because now I can terminate those before they produce their round of seeds that are going to re-inoculate the ground. So that's what we're going to do. Now, a couple of things as I'm getting ready to do this. I wanted to. We know that with planting corn, corn's a heavy feeder. You've got to nourish corn. Corn's a big nitrogen user, and with the sun hemp, we know that there's some organic nitrogen here in the ground from the sun hemp, but we're going to add to that. We're going to reinforce that, and we're going to do that two ways. So the first thing that I'm going to use is a fertilizer, an organic fertilizer specifically here. And the idea with this is when you look at where these sources of nitrogen come from, as opposed to a classic, when you see these numbers most often, these 624, this nitrogen, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, these are often inorganic sources that we're talking about. Well, here we're looking at organic sources, and we're gonna see that nitrogen's coming from things like the alfalfa, the fish meal. There's a couple of different meals in here. We've got some bat guano in this, which is bat manure. So these are not the synthetic sources of these nutrients that we're talking about. Plus, there's a much bigger array of nutrients in this besides nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, that classic NPK. So we're gonna put this on these areas that we're gonna plant the corn into before I do anything with the tractor, so we can incorporate that in. And then here's the other thing that we're gonna do along the way. We're going to be utilizing a thought process known as companion cropping. And what you see here, these are red ripper peas. And these red ripper peas are going to be legumes. They're going to fixate nitrogen. And beans and corns often, these historically are two crops that have been used together. And we're going to use these to help long-term facilitate the growth of the corn. Now, the other thing is we'll get a diversity of plants in there, and we don't want to try to just stick to one plant. We want to create diversity where we can. So this is just another way of doing that. Now, what are we planting? That's probably what some of you are really interested in here. And I'm planting corn, right? And so let me just stop there for a minute, because inherently some are going to think, well, I can't believe you're planting corn. Isn't that a genetically modified crop? Time out. Let's differentiate here. There's different types of corn, and I'm gonna give you two types. There's what is known as sweet corn, and there's field corn, or this is what my grandparents used to call it, and what my dad calls it. He calls it field corn. And field corn oftentimes is what is maybe more technically known as dent corn. But this is by and large not what you're eating. These are not the most palatable, not the tastiest forms of corn. We're going to be using sweet corn, and as the name implies, it's more pleasurable to the palate. Now, we've got two varieties here. We've got the Peaches and Cream, and we've got the Silver King. I think this is sometimes also known as Silver Queen. So interchangeability on the names on that. Funny thing on this is not the most popular corn in our area. We had to do a little hunting to seek out this Silver Queen. As you know, when I talked to my parents about planting corn, my mom would tell me, she said, that's all your grandfather would plant was Silver Queen, because it was just a producer and the family enjoyed the taste of it. So that's one of the reasons we got this. This Peaches and Cream, these again, this is more probably a better corn for Southeast Texas. But something to note about these is that this corn, again, it's not genetically modified corn. That's more of a field corn that we're talking about with that. This is actually what is known as hybridized. That means that these varieties have been bred together to ultimately get a form of corn that has certain attributes that you're looking for. In the case of the Peaches and Cream, the two things that were sought after with this one was the taste. It wasn't so sweet, but it also made it good for storability as well. If you wanted to can this or hold it for any period of time, this was the better option to do that with. And we're gonna try that. God willing, we get our corn up. We're gonna give that Leah's gonna give that a go this time. So that's what the process looks like. And I've never actually done it this way. So we're gonna give this a whirl and see where it goes. But with that being said, I'm gonna jump on the tractor. Actually, before I jump on the tractor, I'm gonna get that fertilizer spread out, and then we'll jump on the tractor and get this incorporated. So that last part that you saw there, that was the final step in the main part of this process. That was the actual planting. Yeah, so we're happy about that. You saw us do the bed preparation with the disc behind the tractor. Then we put the organic fertilizer out. And then now we've got the coal planter on the tractor. And this is what we just did the planting with. Normally this planter is intended for really fine, just really sand, just taking sand without any organic matter in it and planting into that. And we're doing something a little different with it. The other thing about this is that you normally only plant the width of the tractor. And for these beds, the ones that you saw us prepping, this bigger bed was, we normally, if we did that, we would get 4 rows. So we would have only had 4 rows of corn in here. I played around and came up with a little technique of how to get more rows in here, of how to center the tractor. And what we got were 9 rows. And pretty much every bed, what we found is that we were able to double the number of rows and add 1 on top of that. So if we were normally only getting 2 rows, we get 5, right? So we're gonna get more corn as a byproduct of that. The only other thing that we're gonna do here is we're going to use the Jang seeder. And with the Jang seeder, this is what we're going to plant the peas with. And we're gonna plant those peas between every other row of corn. And we're gonna do it with the Jang seeder now because it's gonna be easier to go in between the rows of corn and not compact the corn that we just put in. We don't want to do that. We want to keep that soil nice and loose so that those plants can start to germinate and come on up. Something that I thought about that I didn't mention in the earlier part of this video was I didn't differentiate corn as a grass versus most people thinking that corn is a grain. Oh. Corn is actually a grass, and there's a reason I want to bring this up. a lot of times we hear about the conversation of grain or of corn as a grain, and when you get to the ear of the corn and you have the kernels, actually what you end up planting, you know, if you take this, these, like we would plant, these are this is what people consume, and you would call that a grain. We do classify that as a grain, but actually technically corn is a grass. So the reason that matters, you know, guys, we're real big on nutrition around here, and one of the things that comes up with corn and corn oil, there's a lot of topics, I guess, about this, but one thing that can come up are the different types of fats. And corn, when you pull the oils out of the grain, that's predominantly omega-6s. Can be inflammatory, not necessarily, depending on what your total diet looks like, but if you're using that as a main byproduct of corn processing, which is typically, if a processed food, a lot of times that's what they do with that. You compare that to the actual corn plant, and the corn plant has a lot more omega-9s in it. And so that reflects real similar to what we see with the other grasses, whether it's what you see in our pasture grasses back here or what we have for the grass in the yard, which truly our pasture grasses just grow into the yard now. But point being on that is that it's a grass. Now, here's the other reason I want to make a big deal about this is that corn, guys, you know, you've seen corn. Corn gets tall, has a lot of biomass on it, right? And as we've gone through, and I told you we had some hesitancy about tilling these areas up, and I'm still not a huge fan of doing a lot of tillage, but I don't feel so bad about it when it comes to corn, predominantly because it likes it, right? There's so much biomass when you grow a corn plant that when you till that back in, you're literally putting all that biomass right back down into the ground. So I don't feel that bad about doing some tillage ahead of corn, especially knowing that after we harvest this corn, that we're going to come back in, do that tillage again, and we're probably going to plant 2 cover crops, at least 1 before the next food crop goes in here, but probably 2 cover crops just to maintain the soil structure and build as much structure into this soil as possible.
And no weeds.
And no weeds, yeah. I mean, listen, that's the other great thing about the 9 rows of corn in here versus say 4 like we would have previously had, because now once this corn starts to get up and get a little height on it, it's actually going to shade out those lower plants under it, including those weeds. So those weeds just aren't going to get that momentum that they might otherwise have, and we should get a good stand of corn without a lot of weed pressure in here. So that's another exciting, I mean, listen guys, anybody that does a garden, that does any type of planting will tell you that weeds are their nemesis. It probably goes without saying around here, we don't do anything chemical. We don't do weeds, but we don't do chemicals for weeds either. We don't bring any chemicals onto the farm, period. So with that in mind, it's a real nice way to keep the weeds under control, to keep the weed pressure down as that crop gets on up. And as we put these red ripper peas in here in between every other row of corn, that's only going to make that even better. So we're gonna crowd those weeds out and not let them get the light to promote photosynthesis there.
And when they die, we'll have even more green manure.
Even more green manure, right? So just put those nutrients right back into the ground and facilitate that nutrient cycling, which is what Mother Nature has. That's what Mother Nature does anyway. That's what it wants, right? Okay guys, I've got some more planning to do on these red ripper peas, so we're gonna wrap this video up here. You guys can certainly credit Leah here. She has been out here helping me, getting everything together so we can keep moving and get this corn in the ground.
Definitely a team effort.
It is definitely a team effort when it comes to this type of stuff. So thanks for watching and sticking with us today. We always appreciate you guys coming out. If you like the video, make sure you hit it with a thumbs up and share this information with someone. Let them see a different perspective compared to what they typically hear about food, how food is raised, and just there's a different option. It's not, you don't have to settle in for what you've been told or what you see out there. There is another way to produce food. And if you're looking for food, if you want grass-fed, grass-finished beef, if you're looking for pastured poultry, chicken, duck eggs, even guinea eggs, hey, check out our farm store at harvesthillsranch.com. We'd love to bring some high-quality food to you and your family. Make sure you stick with us for future videos, guys, and we'd always like to have you subscribe if that's something you're interested in as well. So until the next video, we'll see you soon.